Novel Jane Eyre, Chapter 6. Changes. Answer the following questions. What did Jane do when Miss Ingram started to play the piano? The answer. She left the room and went to her usual place in the parlor. Question number 2. What happened after the party? The silence was broken by a terrible scream, so the justice became frightened. Question number 3. How did Jane find Mr. Mason after hearing a scream? Where? His shirt was soaked in blood into Grace Poole's room. Question number 4. Why did Mrs. Reed send to bring Jane? In order to confess that she has committed two great sins. She promised Mr. Reed that she would bring her up as one of her own children, and she should give her a letter. Question number 5. Why was Jane surprised at the wedding of Mr. Rochester and Miss Ingram? Because nobody talked about the wedding, nor did there seem to be any preparations for it. Comment on the following quotations. You may go now. Mr. Mason and I have private business to discuss. It was said by Mr. Rochester to Jane when Mr. Mason came to speak to him. Fetch a towel and some smelling salts and come upstairs. I need you. It was said by Mr. Rochester to Jane when they heard a terrible scream at night. Number 3. I must confess that I have committed two great sins. It was said by Mrs. Reed to Jane when she sent to fetch her to confess about what she has committed towards Jane. Chapter number 7. Proposal. Question number 1. Why didn't Mr. Rochester marry Mrs. Ingram? Because he found that she wanted to marry him because of his money. Question number 2. Why did Mr. Mason enter the church? To tell the vicar that Mr. Rochester was already married to his sister. Question number 3. What was the reaction of Mr. Rochester towards Mr. Mason's speech in church? He was angry and he took all persons to show them his wife at home because she was mad. Question number 4. What happened when Grace Poole opened the door of the attic? A large woman ran out screaming and put her hands around Mr. Rochester's throat and beat him on the cheek. Question number 5. Who was this woman who lived in the attic of Thornfield Hall? She was Mr. Rochester's wife. She was mad and behaved as an animal. Comment on the following quotations. I don't want you to go. I want to share everything here with me and be my wife. It was said by Mr. Rochester to Jane when he was speaking to her in the garden. Quotation number 2. Does anyone know of any reasons why these two shouldn't become man and wife? It was said by the vicar in the church when Mr. Rochester and Jane went to church to marry. Number 3. That is my wife, Mrs. Rochester. I compare her to Jane Eyre and understand why. I hope that I could forget about my wife and start again with Jane. It was said by Mr. Rochester to Mr. Mason when he wanted to marry Jane, but Mr. Mason entered the church and stopped the vicar, telling him that Mr. Rochester is already married to his sister. So Mr. Rochester took them to show them his wife. Chapter number 8, New Friends. Question number 1. What did Jane do after the failure of the marriage? She got up and dressed while it was still dark. Then she collected a few personal things and left Thornfield. Where did Jane arrive after leaving Thornfield? Why? She arrived at Whitcross, a crossroads with no houses nearby, because she had only 20 shillings paid for her to arrive there. Question number 3. Why did Jane go to a shop in Whitcross? To ask if there was any work for women in the village. Question number 4. How did Jane feel at Moor House? She felt like she was among good people again. Question number 5. What did Jane tell Stephen and his sister about herself? She told them that her name was Jane Elliot and she was a governess at law. Comment fully on the following quotations. Number 1. I don't think she is an ordinary beggar, and look how pale she is. She needs our help. It was said by Stephen to his maid Hannah when she refused to accept Jane at home, thinking she is a beggar. Quotation number 2. Then, if you can teach, I have the perfect job for you. There is a vacancy for a teacher in the school in my village. It was said by Stephen to Jane when she told him that she was a governess at law. Chapter number 9. Newfound Wealth. Question number 1. What were Stephen and his sister doing when Jane visited them? They were discussing a letter arrived from a lawyer telling them they were left a fortune from a dead uncle. Question number 2. How did Stephen recognize Jane's identity? On one of his visits at the schoolhouse, he picked up a painting she had done and noticed her name written on the corner. Question number 3. Why did the lawyer, Mr. Briggs, look for Jane? Because she had been left a fortune of £20,000. Question number 4. What did Jane discover about John's family? She discovered that Stephen and his sister were her cousins. Number 5. What did Jane decide towards her fortune? She decided to divide a fortune among her family all. Question number